So I had actually planned to come to this. I registered for the session, wasn't asked to come and speak, and then Sam shot me an email. He said, well, we have a cancellation. Do you want to come and talk? And if this were 3 years ago, I would have said, heck no. There's absolutely nothing I could say that would be of any interest to your audience. We've got mature technologies out there. Yeah, we're tweaking them. Yeah, we're plugging little gaps, little vulnerability gaps, but it's really not all that interesting right now. It took me just 2 seconds to say to Sam, yeah, I'll do it, okay? Because it is an exciting time in transportation security right now. I think you heard a little bit of that already. We talked about, and this talk is, by the way, is going to be a little bit discursive because 24 hours to prepare isn't enough, okay? If I could, if you want to just, if there's something that I say that interests you and you want to raise your hand and just stop and chat about that for a while, raise your hand and we'll go off on that tangent, okay? Yeah, the exciting technologies, what are they? Well, of course, the CT technology, right off the bat, that's exciting technology. It's going to revolutionize the checkpoint. The administrator came up to the lab and we talked about that technology and he says, do you think this is going to do us any good? And is this going to work for us? And I said, from a technical perspective, absolutely yes. These things are going to fly through certification, no question about it. But I got the easy job, okay, because these things are going to get certified very quickly. They are going to be able to find those traditional threats that we've always been looking for. The harder job is actually to get these things to get a ConOps that will actually make these systems work in the checkpoint. TSA has the harder job, okay, in that regard. Well, what do I mean by that? Scott, I think, already talked a little bit about the TSOs and what they do at the checkpoint. These guys are pretty good, I think. Okay, when they are presented with information, they will scour that information until they can make a decision about what it is that is in that threat item. Now, if it's a multi-view X-ray system, they've got just 2 images of that, and it's either I can see something or I can't, and they either clear it or pass it off to secondary. CT systems, we're giving them a 3-dimensional image of that bag, okay? They can rotate that bag, they can zoom in on that bag, they can change contrast on that bag, they can do all kinds of stuff, and because they take their job very seriously, they will. Well, right away you can see that's a problem for throughput, isn't it? Okay, 10 seconds, Scott said, right? It's going to take, you know, typical TSO with all that information in a complex bag. Oh, you're sitting right there, I was looking for you. You know, typical TSO might, you know, spend 30, 40, 50, 60 seconds on that bag, okay, trying to make a determination on a particular threat, looking for that detonator, looking for those wires, the weapon, or those knitting needles, or is that a sharp that somebody's trying to use to attack the aircraft? Well, that can't happen. That's going to screw with throughput way too much. So what we really need to solve that problem is we need some artificial intelligence to be able to take a look at those bags as they're going through the checkpoint and basically auto-clear some of those bags because there is nothing there, all right? The trick to making this technology work at the checkpoints is to have the machines do what the machines do well and have the people do what people do well. Now, I'll tell you what, the screening operation, looking at bag after bag after bag to see if you can find a threat in that is a mind-numbing task that is, you know, frankly error-prone, right? So maybe we can have the machine do that part of it. Now, the machine's going to take a look at something and it's going to say that's suspicious, but these machine learning algorithms that we've got aren't really able to bring in all of the context that a human has about this. So we pass that image off to the human, and the human is able to, and the human knows that something has been flagged in that bag, and now we're asking the human to do something very different. We're asking them to decide whether that's a threat or is not a threat, and that is something that humans are very good at. So I'm looking forward to exciting developments in the checkpoint because of those CT technologies, but coupled with that machine learning. couple things about machine learning. First of all, it's damn good. It's way too good to just sort of put it aside and say we're not going to use that. The return on investment is absolutely huge. I'm really excited about this technology, and it's not that far in the future. In fact, it's here today. We're already testing in the laboratory in Atlantic City some machine learning algorithms, and the performance of these systems is stunningly good. But when I say that, I am saying that as a first cut at the performance, which is to say, it's finding a whole lot of stuff. But that's not the only question you want to ask about this equipment. You want to ask, what's it missing, okay? And why is it missing those things? If we don't answer those questions, we are leaving vulnerabilities in the system which can be exploited by an adversary. Look, if bombs were random occurrences in bags, I wouldn't worry about artificial intelligence because, you know what? Artificial intelligence is pretty good at finding stuff that it's been presented with in the past and then it knows how to categorize into threat or non-threat, significant or non-significant. But when it's an adversary trying to defeat that machine learning algorithm, now it's a different ballgame. You might say, well, yeah, but that's not really going to happen because how can they possibly anticipate the vulnerability of these machine learning algorithms? Patty talked about insider threat. It is very possible that certain people responsible for creating these machine learning algorithms through transfer learning could possibly put a watermark onto those images that would take what would otherwise be a clear indication of a threat and identify it as a non-threat. Okay? You say, Chris, but who cares? That's only in the laboratory. When it gets out into the field, it's taking images of real things. Well, that watermark could be anything. It could be an object in the bag. It could be the placement of multiple objects in the bag that all of a sudden turn off that machine learning algorithm's good sense and identify that as a benign bag. So we've got to be very careful about how we deploy this. It's going to be a challenge for us to actually validate these new technologies which are coming out. As I said, the performance looks absolutely great, but machine learning, well, smart machines, like people, learn over time. Lots and lots and lots of data. We need lots of data to train up these algorithms. We need lots of data to actually test these algorithms. If we were to treat it completely like a black box, we would need more test articles and more time than we can legitimately put at the problem. We don't have the, I can't tell Scott, hey, look, we got this great technology for you and it'll be ready for you in 10 years. Doesn't work. I need to get that technology trained up quickly. I need to get it tested quickly. I need to put it in the field, and I need to give Scott the confidence to trust that equipment. How do we do that? Well, a lot of you folks in the room are responsible for actually coming up with the creative ideas about how we can maybe use synthetic data to actually train and validate these algorithms, how we can do certain white box testing on these algorithms, look under the hood of these of these AI systems, and determine why it is that they may be behaving a particular way. Explainable AI. Have you heard that term before? The notion that you need to have, you know, you have a screener out there and he says, well, I flagged this article. Well, why'd you flag that article? He can tell you. When a AI system flags a bag and says, well, there's a threat in this bag, it might tell you might show you where that threat is. But you can't ask that AI, well, why did you think that was a threat? Why did that look like a gun to you? Why did that look like a sharp? It doesn't necessarily, it's not able to explain itself. But there is an effort these days, right now, to try to create explainable AI so that you can open up that hood, look at that technology, and figure out why it's making certain decisions. That helps us get at the vulnerabilities of AI. Very important. I mean, look, you guys all think AI's out there, right? I mean, any facial recognition software you're using is basically AI already. And that stuff is commonplace now, but it's commonplace in situations where, Patty Cogswell mentioned this morning, game theory is not involved. It's not an adversary that this AI, when you're screening normal passengers who are walking down the runway to identify who they are, okay, the passengers are going to look at that system and they're going to say, well, this system is here to facilitate my boarding of this aircraft. I'm going to be cooperative. I'm going to be compliant with this system. The bad guys aren't thinking that way. The bad guys are thinking, okay, this is the system and I'm going to try to defeat it. Now, how can I do that? That's a whole different type of AI design, test, evaluation, and validation that we need to go through to make sure that we've got the confidence in that system. It's not random what's being presented to these systems. It's something which is trying to defeat that system. What else? So we talked, Patty mentioned the CT systems for the checkpoints. That's really great. Millimeter wave systems, they're coming along very nicely now. Not just the standard rotating antenna, the ProVision on steroids, if you will, but also the flat panel systems. Those flat panel systems are also Roden Schwartz, for those of you who know the industry, but those systems are coming along pretty nicely right now. Those are actually a precursor to walk-by systems, okay, which may be a little bit further in the future than the pause and pose type systems we have. But, one day I'd like the Prime Minister to walk up to Scott and say, hey, can I avoid security? And Scott will say to the Prime Minister, too late, you've already been through it. You just didn't know it, okay? Because it's a walk-by system. Maybe for airports that's going to be tough because we are looking for relatively small threats. But for mass transit, that's essential, right? You cannot have a mass transit system where you have somebody stand in a phone booth and do this, okay, to get on board a subway. It's just not going to happen. We need those walk-by systems. We need to be able, and fortunately for mass transit, the threats that we're looking for are backpack-sized threats, vest-sized threats, and the things that are where it's reasonable that a walk-by system might be able to detect that sort of stuff. When it comes down to passenger inspection, okay, you don't do that without AI. That just has to be. The rules-based algorithms that are trying to identify threats on passengers are not going to work. You need to do that with some sort of machine learning algorithm, a deep learning algorithm. So again, there we're going to need the confluence of advanced technologies to come to a reasonable solution. There's a whole host of secondary technologies that are out, that are in the airport, that are, let's just say, languishing, okay? Bottle liquid screeners. Well, medically essential liquids, we need to test those, so we're going to have those bottle liquid screeners. They're doing okay. But part of the objectives of the checkpoint is not just to enhance security, but to get those passengers through in a way that's more convenient for them, that's faster for them, where they're not going up to Scott and saying, hey, do your job better, but they're saying, hey, wow, thank you, that was easy, that was convenient. Well, that means leaving your water bottle or your soda in your carry-on bag. Now, eventually, there's going to be false alarms on some substance like that in the CT system. And so now the TSO is going to pull out that water bottle and he's going to have to make a call on it. Well, you need that bottle liquid screening technology to back that up. You need that trace detection technology to back that up. A couple of changes that we had going, a couple of very important changes. The advanced millimeter wave systems, the CT systems, combined with the AI, are driving a probably not an exaggeration to say, but a revolution in the a slow-moving revolution in the technology that we're seeing at the airport in our ability to scan passengers. And it's going to have, if we do it right, it's going to be great, okay? If we just sort of try to, insert technologies into predefined slots, the square peg in the round hole, we're gonna screw it up big time. I already talked to you a little bit about the randomly sticking a CT system where a multi-view system is. It's going to screw with your throughput. Don't do it, okay? You need to re-engineer that whole checkpoint to make that work effectively. Re-engineer it with AI. Might also require you to network those systems, those checkpoint systems. So now it's not one machine, one operator, but we do it the same way we do checked bags, where you have multiple machines running, and that data, when it's flagged by that algorithm, goes off to a central alarm resolution area where some TSO can spend some quality time with that image in order to determine whether there's a threat there or not. Come on, guys, I said raise your hands, ask some questions. Here we go.
Hi, David Winks with AccuSite. Have you thought about moving the perimeter out by putting sensors on the buses and the taxis and the limos that are serving the airport to detect, for example, explosives that might be in somebody's baggage as they're coming to the airport?
I haven't done that. I know some people are doing that. Checkpoints are really nice in the sense that, if you want to address a security threat, you either go to a choke point or you establish a choke point. And when you're looking outside the perimeter of the airport, an uncontrolled perimeter, you don't have those choke points anymore. So basically, what's your detection rate? Well, you have a detection rate of those people who happen to be transiting that area where you're actually screening, but what about people and objects which aren't necessarily transiting that area? So it's a complicated problem. Explosives are a difficult problem because it's a difficult problem for the terrorists, and it's a difficult problem for the people who are trying to defeat the terrorist, because when you're talking about a trace detection of vapors or particles, the terrorist is always going to wonder whether the object he has is producing vapor or particles which can be detected, okay? And on the, defense side of the house, a lot of these explosives don't produce vapor in any significant quantity. And whether particles of this explosive are produced or not is a function of how that object is prepared and transported to the location where it wants to be used. So that's that's the Wild West of security. Other questions, comments people might have about?
Hi, Chris. Brian Lewis, Noblus.
Yeah, Brian.
One of the beauties of machine learning is that at the heart of it, it's really statistics. Traditionally, we've certified algorithms by having a single operating point and with a detection rate. Can you talk a little bit about the opportunity we have with machine learning to do risk-based screening where we adapt algorithms on a per-item basis?
Good question. We have begged the system vendors for years to actually come up with what we call a ROC curve. A ROC curve is basically probability of detection versus your false alarm rate. And you can operate and theoretically, you can operate your equipment on any point on that ROC curve. So, for instance, instead of having actually multiple lanes for different folks, okay, where you send some through the metal detector and some through the AIT system, you have one very capable system, but that system is tuned to the individual who's walking through there. So an individual, a low-risk individual walks through, you basically say, well, you know what, I'm going to dial up my false alarm. I'm going to dial down my probability of detection because I really don't think this guy's got anything on him, and I just want to, get her warm and fuzzy, but and that simultaneously lowers your false alarm rate. So people move through the system very quickly and without very many secondary inspections. But then you got a shady looking character who comes along and you say, you know what, a little bit more scrutiny here. Let's move up that ROC curve to a higher probability of detection, but you're sacrificing your false alarm, so you'll get a number of false alarms. You'll have to send these people to secondary. Operating at an indeterminate point on that ROC curve is going to be very important for being able to do risk-based security. And in the past, the vendors did not, I mean, you could do this with rules-based algorithms and your standard equipment, but the vendors were not keen on that. They said our equipment operates at one particular point, that point that's defined by TSA. The false alarm rate that's defined by TSA, the probability of detection which is defined by TSA, it's 1 point. But now with TSA looking more at risk-based approaches to screening, and with AI coming along that's able to easily slide up and down that ROC curve, we're starting to see that data and now we're able to assess the performance of those systems at various levels of scrutiny, intensities of scrutiny. So it's working out very nicely for us. It's dovetailing very nicely with TSA's risk-based approach to screening. More questions, comments?
Thanks. Josh Mahoney with Cloudera. Just kind of curious, in the theme of research and with the lab that you're doing, how much cross-industry collaboration are you doing across domain space? Like, for example, a lot of AI and ML is in with autonomous vehicles right now with Uber and Tesla, some of these others, or even just like with the IoT space as a whole. You know, what are we doing? Maybe even with casinos looking at biometrics. I mean, casinos have been looking at people in the 360 degree view of every customer coming in to figure out what offers are going to give that person or not.
Good question. Look, it makes, when we're talking about AI systems and deep learning, it makes perfect sense to cast that net as wide as we possibly can to try to bring in both people, individuals, because this is actually, programming of deep learning systems is actually accessible to individuals and small companies, but we want to bring in as many as possible. Of course, we have to do that within the confines of our security interests. We can't go out and ask folks in Afghanistan to help us design our security systems. It's probably a little bit too much risk with doing something like that. I will mention that the prize competition for the AIT systems was eye-opening in terms of the number of folks who wanted to participate. That competition was done under the America Competes Act. The America Competes Act says, well, yeah, you know what, the only people who can win this competition are American citizens and organizations, and a bunch of foreigners, individuals and organizations said, that really sucks, but can we still participate? And the answer was, yeah, you can participate, you just can't win. They chose to participate, okay? And some of them actually did pretty well in that competition. There's so much that we want to bring in. One of the reasons I said to Sam very quickly, yes, that I want to come and talk, because here's a bunch of folks who think about these issues on a regular basis and can bring resources and ideas to the table, and that's what I'm encouraging. Yeah. Anything else? Sir.
Thanks. Paul Simpson from Alba Consulting. A lot of great things going on at the checkpoint that you talked about. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on below the floor on that same airplane, though, with technologies in air cargo?
Checked bag is still very of interest to us. When you're looking, now, checked bag is what started the whole problem, right? I mean, Pan Am 103, bomb in a checked bag, explodes, brings down Pan Am 103. And so we started working that problem very early. That problem was one of the most tractable because the terrorists don't tend to put themselves inside of their checked luggage with the ability to assemble and detonate that bomb in person. It's an open loop system where that bomb has to kind of go and detonate when they want it to detonate. That means that it's there has to be certain characteristics of that device that are relatively easily interrogated by that checked bag CT system. So we feel we got a pretty good handle on that checked bag stuff. Now, what's challenging that technology right now, and I haven't talked too much about this because I just take it for granted, but maybe I should have mentioned something, homemade explosives. C4 is C4 is C4 is C4, okay? Peroxide and fuel is a very broad category, but we got to catch everything in that category. And that's what's challenging some of the CT systems at this point. We need to make sure that we've identified that category and that the rules for identifying the explosives capture everything in that category. I'm being a little bit vague in the way I describe that because obviously there's some sensitivity to what those rules are. I'll tell you right now, those systems, which are primarily deterministic rules-based algorithms, are beginning to incorporate deep learning. That's a means of reducing false alarms, of taking items, benign items, which tend to have similar properties to explosives, and taking a second look at those benign items and saying, well, you know what? The texture of that object is not indicative of any explosive or is particularly indicative of this benign item, so we don't feel that's an explosive and we will clear that. So yeah, deep learning's coming into those checked bag systems as well. And of course, checked bag systems are also, I mean, I don't want to make light of I don't want to suggest that that problem has been solved and we're just tweaking it a little bit. The challenges for checked bags are that boy, they got to push a lot of bags through there very, very quickly, and even bags don't complain, but passengers do when they don't get their bags at their destination. They complain. Yeah, so we have to make the throughput there is a big thing, and that's kind of hard to do as you constantly are upgrading those algorithms to identify more and more diverse threats. So yeah, we're looking at that very carefully.
David Weeks again from AccuSite. Are you addressing supply chain security issues for electronics or parts for various systems?
Can I say no and not get in trouble? Yeah. Okay. There you go. Yeah. If you're talking about those systems which we rely on to provide our security, okay, that has been a small, practically incestuous group of companies and organizations that have developed a tremendous amount of trust within that aviation security community. Yeah, I know these people personally. I know their companies. They actually move from company to company, and of course they've gone through the clearance process, the DHS's clearance and suitability processes. So we feel pretty confident that what they're providing to us is not an adulterated system. But have we actually put in place formalisms associated with that? I'm not aware of that being an issue, and perhaps TSA has done something there, but I couldn't tell you. I'm done. Sam's given me, thank you.